Oh, snap. It's the next episode of Real Tech Tizzle, actually Real Tech Talk with Eric Brody, brand new sponsor, Annex Ventures. You know what that means? That means we getting big today, folks, for the very first time. It is our first female entrepreneur technologist, Allia Mohamed out of Igloo. Sit down, hit that YouTube so you could see me with the hand gestures and the movement, because if you're just listening, you don't know how wild we get in here. Welcome to the Real Tech Talk podcast. We going big, people. That's why we're here, bro. This is Real Tech Talk. Boom shakalaka. So who the hell are you, bro? You know, what are you into? What do you do? Dude, you can keep it real here. Tell me about these real estate players.
Eric Brody is the managing principal of CEMVC LLC. All opinions expressed by Eric and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of CEMVC LLC. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of CEMVC LLC may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Welcome to the latest episode of Real Tech Talk, people. Today is a first, and that first is we have our first female tech entrepreneur. Can we clap it up, people? By the way, that was a real clap. That was not a clap track. So I have my dear first female entrepreneur, Allia Mohamed of Igloo. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are very, very, very welcome. So I think that my audience would like to know, just to get it started, what is Igloo? What is it about? What brought you into technology? Just let it flow a little bit for us.
Yeah, my favorite thing to talk about, Igloo.
And I imagine you never talk about it, right?
Never.
I mean, this isn't a normal subject for you.
My friends want to kill me. Igloo is a digital and transparent marketplace that is connecting great renters with great owners. And what renters are doing on the Igloo platform is they are reading and sharing reviews about their rental experiences. They are doing research on the buildings and landlords that they're considering. So they're getting access to city data, things like, are there any open violations in this building, any bed bug reports? And then ultimately they're leveraging that data to make an informed and confident decision about where they want to rent.
All right, so let me back it up. So you're saying that you are a platform bringing renters and landlords together, but what is its ultimate goal?
The ultimate goal is to make better matches between tenants and the apartments that they're considering. And one of the biggest pain points that we've heard in talking to tens of thousands of renters in New York is 65% have had a negative rental experience in their life, right? We've all sort of been there. We move into an apartment and something is not up to our expectations, or we weren't made aware of something that was wrong with the apartment or the building. Maybe you moved into the building because you thought you were going to get access to the gym and the pool, and there was going to be a 24-hour doorman, and then you learn, oh, actually, no, that's a $250 extra amenity fee that you have to pay once you move in.
Oh, so you're saying there's a lack of disclosure? Never.
Yeah,
Come
exactly.
on.
So, our big thesis is that transparency just results in better matches, a more satisfied tenant, but also a more satisfied landlord, because if the tenants that are getting placed know everything before they move in, right, the good, bad, and ugly, their expectations are going to be managed, they're going to be a happier renter, and ultimately, hopefully, they be, a long-term renter in that building.
So let me bring that back to that tech space. So it's a marketplace.
Correct.
So you're bringing these tenants and landlords together.
Exactly.
So what was the origin story? Where did you figure out that was what was relevant to your life? And then I'd love to hear kind of what it was in the past that got you into technology to even care about trying to create this solution.
Right. So, I've been a renter in New York City going on 10 years, and a handful of those experiences have been positive, some of them not so positive. I had one building where...
Let's hear some of the greatest negative ones that you have had. I would love to hear.
One building I lived in, beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. Looked beautiful. And to be honest, it has a special place in my heart. I love that space. But the heat always broke, right? Dead of winter. Landlord was not very responsive. There was one particular winter where my neighbor had just had a newborn baby. She had to go stay in a hotel for a couple of weeks. It was just too cold. It was too dangerous for her to be there. And I'm kind of pulling my hair out being like, we spend a lot of money to live in this property. The least we can get is an update, right? An email saying, hey, we're looking into it. So sorry for the inconvenience. Here's a rent credit or this is when it's going to be fixed. But we never really got that communication.
How would you communicate with the landlord there?
We wouldn't. There was nothing.
Not a phone number?
No, nothing. It was complete silence. If we saw the super, then maybe we would try and get some information.
Oh, so it had a super. There's a bonus.
It had a super,
Someone
but the super couldn't replace the boiler, right? So this was this issue. So when I was looking for my next apartment, I was thinking, okay, you know what? I want to do more research before I sign a lease. I want to get all the information before I move in, and was just
so to solve for this problem.
Yes.
Like, you know what? In my next one, I want to understand, maybe get some more data points.
Exactly.
So how did you go about even looking for it?
Exactly right. So I just started Googling, hey, reviews about this particular building, wasn't really finding anything. And then I just started standing outside of buildings that I was considering moving into, waiting for people walking in and out. It's totally normal in New York. I'm like this psycho on the corner being like, hey, do you live here? Like, what's it like to live here? Who's the landlord? How do they, are they responsive? And I just learned a lot of really amazing information by doing that. People would say, oh, this building shows really well. It looks nice and modern, but the walls are super thin, so you can hear your neighbors every single move. Or the windows aren't really well insulated and it's on a busy avenue, so it's going to be loud all the time. And for me, for some renters, that might not be an issue, right? Maybe you're never in the apartment. Maybe it's just a crash pad and you work 20 hours a day like most New Yorkers, did pre-pandemic. So that was sort of the light bulb for openigloo was, could we crowdsource this information from renters and just help them have a little bit more, data and reviews before they make the decision?
And so by waiting there and hearing from these neighbors, maybe other tenants, that did inform you, and did that work in your next decision? Was it a better one as a result of that?
Yes, absolutely. I've been in that same apartment going on 5 years, and I don't have any plans to move because I got all the information up front. I knew what was wrong with the building, what was good about the building, and I just sort of weighed those against my personal preferences and made a decision that ultimately I'm really happy with. So I wanted everyone to have that sort of experience when they were looking for an apartment, because I feel like, especially in cities like New York, it's this race to sign a lease. And once you move in, if you've made the wrong decision, you're stuck there for at least 12 months, right? Maybe 24 months if you've signed a 2-year lease. So that was really the genesis of the idea is, transparency is paramount when it comes to making such a large financial decision.
So now you understood the problem was, okay, we don't know enough about apartments. We don't know what's popping. So in other words, how are we going to get that information? So what was the background of yourself that said, I can figure out now a tech solution? How did that become PropTech from what sounds to me like I agree with you? You know, I think we were doing it in Yelp on restaurants forever or any type of products, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of had a bit of a different career path. I started my career in capital markets and banking. Then I
the enemy.
Sorry.
Wow. Capital markets and banking. Wow.
Then I moved into venture capital, which is a little less hated of an industry. But
where though? In New York?
In New York. So I was, I was talking to founders every day and just getting really inspired by, listening to the personal and professional pain points that they were solving. So when I had been ideating openigloo for a while, I was sort of leveraging my VC background to sort of bring it to life. And then the pandemic hit, and it sort of just seemed like this perfect inflection point to make the transition from investor to founder, and just spent a lot of time looking for the right partner to build it with, because my background wasn't in software engineering or development. So
very
interesting. I really needed to find, the person that was going to help me bring it to life.
So your complement is a software engineer.
Exactly.
You were the business, created the understanding of what needed to be solved, and then you partnered with a software engineer. Very interesting.
Exactly. So Shrujan Ruthu, he's my co-founder. He's the CTO. He built the entire product from scratch. We were a team of 2 for all of 2020. Him and I went to grad school together, so we had known each other for quite a few years.
In the city?
In the city. And then we came together and we started building openigloo, and here we are.
So now, what is the technology behind openigloo now? So what is it then? Okay, I get it. We know what the problem is. So what's the tech layer that you created?
Yeah, so the tech layer is really just crowdsourcing and organizing data from a variety of different sets. So, some challenges at the beginning were, we were scraping all of these public data sets from the city to find out, okay, what's the address of the building? Are there any violations? What's the complaints, or what are the litigations? And trying to put that in a format that was easy to navigate. So that's
translate to your consumer base.
Exactly.
Right?
Like what does this mean? A lot of renters, and I definitely didn't know, and the only reason I know is because I started building openigloo. What's a Class A violation versus a Class C violation, right? Class C is way worse. Violation C
but it's later in the alphabet, doesn't it mean it's better?
Exactly. So A is around admin, maybe the landlord didn't file a particular report they were supposed to.
So nothing to do with a user experience.
Exactly. It's not life-threatening. It's not hazardous to the building. A violation, a Class C violation is super hazardous. It could be, a rat infestation. It can be, a big mold situation in the building. That's a Class C. So really a big part of our platform has been educating the user as well. What do these things mean?
So what do you write when it's Class C rat? You're like, damn, don't go there.
It's got a little circle around it. We explain what Class C violations mean so that renters can sort of take those things into consideration, because there are a lot of nice buildings that you just don't know what's behind the curtains.
Well, I was going to get into that, but I really want to talk about Igloo. But one of the things I'm thinking is like, but if you shit on that building, right, and then the landlord is like super upset, isn't that now like an issue almost with it, right? But maybe not. Maybe it's like a call to get your building better so that you get this better clientele that we've been sort of, bringing together, these renters that do care, that are leaving, these reviews, right? So are you finding that yet? Any resistance or any type of friction there with the landlords?
I mean, there's always curiosity and questions about how this works and how it impacts landlords. But our argument is that majority of landlords are doing the right thing. A majority of them are putting a lot of time and care into their properties, taking care of their tenants. A recent report that we just put out was, 60% of renewals last month were for increases of less than 10%. And you're hearing these headlines in New York City where, my rent was raised 50, 60, 70%. And people are like, oh my goodness, what's going on in New York? And what our data is showing is actually the majority of landlords are giving moderate, reasonable increases, right?
10% would be inflation.
Yeah, exactly. So, we look at that and we're like, that's reasonable. And what we want to do is we want to say, okay, here are the landlords that are taking care of their properties, that are giving out, reasonable incremental increases. And we just want to send renters their way. Of course, there's always going to be the handful of bad actors, right?
Because wasn't the Web 1.0 straight hate? I always talk about it. I always say the show, like my first comment ever was, my father was an architect, Van equals architect, Eric equals son, developer, Eric and Van equals shit. That was honestly my first comment. So are you finding that? Are you finding like legit comments about these buildings where people are actually, caring, or is it just hate?
The one thing I am super proud of the content that we've generated is the balance and the constructive, feedback that these reviews are capturing. And I think this is something that really differentiates us from a Yelp or a Google, where it's really mostly the disgruntled people who are ranting for 8 paragraphs about something really specific. And what we're doing on Igloo is, we're asking, what are the pros? What are the cons? How do you rate this building on cleanliness, pest control, garbage management? It's very structured data.
Yeah, you won't let them just riff.
Exactly right. All of our reviews are moderated. They have to abide by our community guidelines. And actually, on the flip side, landlords have been giving us positive feedback about the reviews that they've been getting. And of course, some of them are positive, but some of them have good information. We had one landlord tell us recently, I was made aware about something that was happening in my building that I had no idea about until I started reading the reviews on Igloo.
Well, there's 2 things that just came to mind. One of the things you're saying, which reminds me very much of like Web 3.0 and the DAO, right, is you've created this community. You've curated this community of which has an opinion, which is talking about specific values. I mean, that's really what, the blockchain and a lot of these communities are all about on the DAO. How did you create that? What was the, I think in tech speak, we call it, what was the wedge? How did you get that going?
Yeah, so it was just a lot of experimentation at the beginning. We leveraged social media a lot.
How so?
So we have an Instagram page that we were sharing a lot of, housing resources, trying to connect renters with information that was useful when they're looking for apartments. So things
Why
like,
don't you drop the handle so the
it's at openigloo on Instagram and TikTok.
OPEN?
Yes, and we're recently on TikTok, openigloo_NYC. And
we're TikToking.
Yeah, we've been doing well there as well. But things like 6 tips to negotiate your rent, right? What do you do in a case of there's a mice problem? Like, what should you do in that case?
So that long tail, try to drive people like looking for that type of information. Now drive traffic to that social handle.
Exactly right. So we've just been building a community around Instagram, and then that's translated to the product. People, learning about us through our Instagram or through other campaigns.
And you said it was only the 2 of you. So is it just you and your partner who are on your social media?
So thankfully,
are you guys the faces and the names?
Yeah. So thankfully, the team has grown since 2020. But on the social media, it's just me and my chief marketing officer who's running all of our social media, and we keep it small.
So how big is the marketplace that you have now created?
So we are over 1 million users on openigloo. Those are New York City
Which
renters.
is since, you said, the pandemic.
Since August 2020.
Wow.
So we just celebrated our second birthday. We're pretty excited about hitting that milestone. And that's 1 million New York City renters who've come into the website or the mobile application, have leveraged the tool to search for apartments and do research on their buildings.
So now what's the model? How do you monetize it?
Yeah, so the model that we've been working on that we're excited about is actually, walking renters through the entire leasing process. So, going beyond just reading reviews and doing research, but actually finding available apartments, being able to apply for those apartments on openigloo, being able to sign your lease digitally on openigloo, and then make your monthly payments. And this sort of came from a bunch of different conversations that we had on the landlord and the renter side. We started learning a lot of renters in the city get scammed when they're looking for apartments, right? There isn't this level of confidence that the apartment is real, that it's priced correctly, that they're going to be able to get it. So really trying to, create this environment where we have verified apartments on openigloo that you can rent.
So that's that trust question,
Exactly,
right?
The trust question. And they're from, landlords that have a good reputation, because ultimately we've been collecting this data and these reviews for 2 years. We know who the good actors are.
But I'm saying, so is it a transaction? So they're on the platform. Who's paying? Is it the landlord paying? Or is it the tenant paying?
It's a service fee model that either side can pay. So depending on what's happening in the market, very similar to sort of a broker fee.
Correct.
Renters can absorb
Which I
the
think
entire
is
cost.
important for you just to briefly explain. So how does this usually work?
Yeah. So in New York, it usually works. You look for an apartment and there's a listing agent usually associated with that apartment. And in a very hot market, which we're in right now, the renter will typically pay upwards of 15% of the annual rent to the broker to get.
So just for the audience to know, whatever you think that rent is, take that annual rent, multiply it by 15%, and that's the fee to the broker in the beginning. Then you can divide that across each payment and realize it's a little more expensive, or a lot more.
Yes,
whatever.
Exactly.
And that's when it's a landlord's market.
That's when it is a landlord's market, correct. Okay. So then the tenant pays the fee. When it's a renter's market, and we had that in the pandemic, which was great, renters weren't paying the fee. The landlords were paying the fee to the brokers.
Gotcha.
So, our value prop is we're giving this extra layer of transparency. We're connecting you with reputable buildings and landlords, and you're paying a much lower fee over the duration. Which is that
transaction cost, right?
Exactly.
You've sort of directing that transaction cost instead of through a third party. Maybe you can make these transactions together. And are you a reduced fee?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. We're closer to 5% compared to the 15%. And renters, if the renters are paying the fee, they can pay it monthly over the duration of the lease instead of having to pay it up front, which is a huge financial burden, especially in a city like New York. You're paying first months, you're paying security deposit, and then you're paying the broker fee. It really is this expensive transaction.
So where do you stand today? So you started 2 years ago, fine. You've now created this audience on your quote unquote wedge on social. So where do you stand transactionally now? Are you now trying to just track how many transactions monthly and you're seeing what that curve is?
Exactly.
Like, where do you stand?
Yeah. So we launched the marketplace component, right? Transacting leases earlier this year. We've been partnering with different landlords and property managers to get, exclusive listings on the platform. We've had some really good early success with processing leases. So, we're upwards of processing hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent every single month. And really the team's focus is, continuing to build this community and really build a product that is helpful for renters, but ultimately get them access to, better and reputable apartments on the platform that they can effectively book.
Right, which is that trust issue. So all that other bullshit kind of falls by the wayside. If you're on openigloo, at least you know what you're getting.
Exactly.
So what do we call that? Your future. What is your what's your trajectory over the next year? What's your roadmap?
Yes.
I don't know why that took so damn long. You know what? We do this on Fridays sometimes, and we got to start on Tuesdays, bro, because the brain has shut down. I'm reading all these books so I can get these vocabulary words. What people don't understand is in the background. I hate being ignorant to certain things, and I'm studying and reading and understanding. And then I remember the word, except when I need to ask you about it. So what is your roadmap? What are you going to do for the next 6, 12 months? What's the story?
So we have a big, long-term vision of really becoming this global network for renters, right? Mm-hmm. I think the frustrating...
By the way, you have to be global. You're in tech, right? Big upfront cost.
We have to be global.
Massive then enterprise,
exactly,
right?
Right. $60 billion is transacted every single year in residential rent in New York City. A lot of that is done in a very untransparent way. Renters are just signing leases. So for us, we want to build this global network where renters can feel confident to rent an apartment anywhere in the world, right? And not have to go through the headache that they typically do, right? If someone moves from Paris to New York tomorrow, they're not going to be able to rent an apartment. They're going to have to jump through hoops. They're going to have to get a guarantor. The fact that they were a good renter in Paris does not hold any weight in New York City.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. If you have a Canadian guarantor, no bueno. If you have a guarantor
that's not in the tri-state, that's something that is even an issue. So really, how I think about OpenIgloo long term is really this global network of renters that can rent anywhere in the world in just a few clicks, and it doesn't need to be this hard.
Very cool. So what is the biggest, friction that you have today? I mean, look, I know we've even had someone on the show, it hasn't dropped either yet, where there's other people trying to enter this space. What do you think is what makes you guys so different in owning this rental transaction? People coming from different angles. Some it's IoT, right, way that they get in. Where do you think you guys are different?
So our biggest differentiator is the community that we've built for renters, right? We've sort of done things backwards where we've built one side of the marketplace, we've built this community of renters, and now we're in the process of trying to connect them with these portfolios. So, we've been having conversations with various partners, onboarding them onto the platform, but there really is this divide between renters and owners that's existed for hundreds of years. So just really the challenge in this space always is convincing both sides to work together or to change the model. And I think especially in a place like
there's value to working together, right?
Exactly right. And one of our landlord partners, and I'd love to quote him, he says, unhappy renters are bad for business. From their perspective, they don't want renters to move in and then be disgruntled with something that didn't go as planned.
Yeah, what is that? If one happy person tells 5 people, one upset person tells 10, right? Isn't there some kind of stat like that?
And there is this shift happening in the real estate space where managers really care about their online reputation. Online reviews hasn't caught up to real estate in the way that it has to other sectors. But there is huge demand there, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, look, I hate fronting like it was my stat or I know, but I'm reading these books, right? And I didn't meet the author, so I don't need to drop their names on this. But one of them, which I thought was pretty cool that I feel like you're addressing is, so Airbnb, right? People are like, oh, Airbnb it's just a tech layer, right? But what Airbnb solved was trusting that if you went to Omaha, that the place was clean and neat based on a review. And that sounds to me kind of like what you're doing. So maybe this wedge of trust is the way to go in doing it, because it's that's the human factor, right?
Exactly.
The human factor is we know about the building, we have this information about it, we've recorded it, and that drives to your platform. So I think that that's really fascinating. The other thing that I'm curious if you agree, disagree, is that management of rentals, right? We value rental buildings. We used to say it's X amount of square feet, and we're getting X amount of dollars, it's net operating income, and it's a cap rate, and that's the valuation.
Yep.
Are you seeing this shift where it's actually, we're starting to see these consumers care about the way in which you manage and what you're offering in that management is what you're saying, right? Are you seeing that trend where you're seeing they'd rather go to a well-managed building with specific, interfacing and interactions versus your brownstone problem?
Yeah, on both sides. So I'll give you an example of, a new construction building, right? Luxury building, all the amenities, rating, a D rating on energy efficiency. Right. So what that means is the tenant is running their AC or their heater in certain seasons and they're paying $500 a month in Con Ed expenses. So for them, the building might have checked all the boxes, but then they see that and they're like, oh, what's going on here? So you definitely hit the nail on the head. There is this trend of renters, wanting more insight into how a building is managed. What is the philosophy of management, right? Because you've definitely got these groups, and this is where you've read the headlines where it's just, we want to maximize rental prices, we'll increase rent 60%, we don't care. And that's fine if they want to operate their businesses like that. But I think it's important information to pass along to the renter, because a renter who's just going to move into a place for 1 year, they might not care what the renewal looks like. But if you're a person that's looking for a home for the next 3 to 5 years, you absolutely care how management operates renewals, leasing, the building, how responsive they are. So this is definitely a trend.
Are you seeing that? Because look, it sounds to me like you're at the front line. And I think that this thesis, which I may not be explaining appropriately, is like a huge shift, which is this, like, all things being equal, if they have technology and a good community, maybe your building's worth more because, like you're saying, the ratings are just so much higher. Really responsive when there was a problem, right? Like, and people, are you seeing that that's actually attracting people to different assets, even though you hear about the other one, oh, modern this, modern that, pool, blah. They're like, nah, I'd rather be able to interface or have a better relationship with my landlord?
Yep, absolutely. So we're actually seeing less demand on the amenity side and more interest into management's responsiveness. Because we've seen reviews from some of these luxury buildings, like I mentioned, they've got the pools, they've got the dog runs, they've got everything. But then the comments are, management took 2 weeks to respond to this maintenance issue. Or they sent the renewal, 1 week before I was supposed to. Like, it's just about disorganization and it's about communication. So that trumps everything else. All of the amenities without responsive management really decreases the value of a building from a renter's perspective.
So I like that, because I think that for us to understand that is like really important. So management, and it's not property management old school, right? The lease, it's how they manage your expectation of using this asset, which we're seeing in retail. We're seeing that in office now. They care about what does it feel like when you walk in, and how does the energy, right? Mm-hmm. I always talk about this quick example. So we had finished a building in Greenpoint, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm in the elevator, and, we put in some technology so that we can interface with the community, which has been dope, and we respond quickly. Okay, I'd love to see what Igloo has to say. But I'm in the elevator with one of the tenants, and he goes, and he knows that I'm the builder developer, and he goes, Eric, the vibe, man. I'm like, what do you mean, man? Just tell me about it. He's like, the vibe, the energy, the way I feel when I'm here, I'm so grateful to be here. And I was like, wow, that's pretty fresh, because in my mind, it's like, do you like the apartment? Is it cool? Like, is it, like HVAC wise, or,
yes,
in that sort of old school mentality. And this new school ideology of creating this community seems to be like what's really relevant. Now, I'm just curious, are you seeing economically yet that that's having an impact?
Like if renters are willing to pay more for that,
or stay longer, or anything yet? Like, and is there any way of getting those analytics?
So there's definitely ways to get the analytics, as we're having anecdotal conversations with renters all of the time on what their willingness to pay for that type of service. We're seeing it sway renters other ways, right? Because ultimately they're comping different buildings in a neighborhood that they're considering, and they're taking in the reviews and the feedback and the city data into consideration and making their decision. So we're definitely seeing buildings lose out on renters moving in once they get access to this information. And that's something where, managers want to work with us to try and resolve some of those issues that have been persistent.
Oh, it's interesting. I think that's something like a theme to watch, because all these incumbents that have all these units that think they're fresh may get taken out. What is that? Innovator's dilemma, by these new technologists or new management companies sort of addressing that issue. So, on this podcast, we always like to do a number of things. One, what's your latest ask? Like, what do you need today and where you stand, right, is one. Two, as a technologist in general, I'm going to ask you a question about the market. Okay. All right. So first, let's hear what like the latest, you're not Series D going public. So where do you guys stand? What are you like in the moment business wise? Where are you at? And what are you looking for?
Yeah. So we've raised a seed round to date earlier this year, which we're pretty excited about. Of course, we're always building relationships with investors. But I guess my two big asks right now is for, renters listening to go check out their buildings, do research, share reviews, right? We really need to continue to build this community. That's really where the strength comes.
Yeah, make sure you promote us on your fucking Instagram, homegirl. You better put us out there if you got, 20,000 people.
Yeah, and then the second one is really, landlord partnerships and wanting to have more conversations and do more learning with that side of the aisle, because, they have a lot of perspectives to share and would love them to be a part of, the roadmap for Igloo, and ultimately allow us to, send some renters their way.
Listen, I think if they really understood what you and I just said about the way in which management is changing, they would be looking for you. But you and I know, because you meet them, it's that old school mentality and they're going to miss out. But that, like, if they really understood what was occurring and if they could get that feedback from their consumer base, they should actually be super interested in coming to communicate with you, right? Your issue will be that it's your platform only, exclusive. You'll have your other issues, but the reality is if they understand the future of the way in which tenants are going to interface with their building, they have to search for you. They're just going to have to work out some kind of deal.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that when a landlord is working with Igloo, it sends a signal to our community, right? That they can be trusted, that they're opening themselves up to this level of transparency. So from the renter's perspective, it's this big check mark. And we're really excited about the landlords that we've been partnering with because that's their perspective, which is a paradigm shift in apartment leasing needs to happen. Transparency in this space needs to happen. And that's ultimately why they've backed us.
And getting paid needs to happen and get the bag for Open Igloo. So listen, I got a question for you then. So as a technologist, we like to ask you regarding what the hell is happening in New York. And I know you're New York centric right now. Eventually we'll be able to ask you around the world. But for right now, what is the story? Are rents going to continue to rise? And just to finish the thought. And in addition, since supply has just gotten so restricted with the sunsetting of the 420, whatever you call it today. I mean, we'd say 420A, is it G, is it Affordable New York, whatever you call that program. So what do you think is going to happen? Are rents going to continue to fly through the roof because we've just restricted supply? In addition, that Queensboro president who said no to this massive Silverstein project, and then the guys, the young lady in Harlem who said no, they didn't say no. I'm simplifying it, but they didn't like the plan, so the developer walked. We're not building anymore. And rents are going through the roof. What do you predict over the next year or two with what's going to happen in New York City rent?
So I think in the short term...
Wait, I just want you to know before you answer.
Yes.
We are going to repost this in a year to see if you were like the magician. But I will tell you this. Elon Musk has been saying that there's going to be autonomous cars since 2014. So you're not in bad company if you're not right. So just feel free to riff, all right?
Okay, great. So... I think in the short term, rents are going to stabilize. And I say that with quotation marks because, it's very subjective depending on who you are. But what we're seeing from Open Igloo data is that lease renewals are consistently going down. So, in February, renewals on leases were 22%.
What's the metric, just so I understand?
So how much...
Did that person renew their lease?
So what was the renewal proposition that they got from management, right? So how much was their rent going to go up if they signed the lease? So in February, the average renewal increase was 22%.
Damn.
In July, it was 11%. And the reason that we're seeing that consistently decline is because those COVID deals and concessions were done. There's no more. So those deals are no longer in the space, and that's why you're seeing those steep increases. So I think between now and December, we're going to see rents start to stabilize. Long term, you touched on this. We have a housing supply issue, right? Some of the modeling says we need 350,000 units to actually start housing New York City. And of course, there's projects that get pushed back. But this is New York. That is a part of our DNA. Is a proposal gets put, everybody fights it, trying to, figure out the environmental impact, trying to figure out what percentage of it is going to be for affordable housing. What is the impact on the community if this building goes up? That's going to happen in New York forever. There's always going to be that debate.
That something will get proposed and move forward, or are we stuck? Because when you speak to my peers, they're putting, the theoretical hammer down. They are not moving forward with projects.
Right. It will happen. It'll just take time. But I think that is quite typical for New York, right? Unless you have a case of Williamsburg where everything was rezoned and we saw all of those buildings go up. You might see areas and pockets of New York that get sort of some of those rezonings. But I think there's an opportunity to leverage the existing housing, right? Where, the mayor is talking about transforming hotels and different buildings and unused office buildings into apartments.
It's all talk, though.
I think it's all talk.
It never gets anywhere.
I know. My hope is that, we actually start leveraging some of these creative solutions to get more units into the market, because supply constraint is definitely a challenge. And you don't think then rents go up because the marketplace says supply is constrained, you still want to be here, so we're just going to keep raising rents and you're going to stay because New York is the freshest, or are we going to continue to lose population? I don't think we'll continue to lose population, but you don't see. So, for example, in Manhattan, vacancy rates have always been sub 2%, right? Always, even pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And then in Brooklyn and Queens, you have closer, 7, 8%. So there are apartments. There's definitely supply constraint. I definitely want to preface with that. So I don't think rents are going to continue to skyrocket the way that, we haven't seen that happen in Manhattan in 2018, right? I think it's going to be incremental, but there definitely needs to be a conversation about housing supply, new projects, building more projects. And ultimately, both sides need to come together and, come to some sort of agreement. But there's always going to be healthy debate on this topic. It's New York City.
No, I hear you. I mean, my thesis is that we need more multifamily. I want to go out and figure out how to create that. But right now with the, speaking to capital or the rest of it, people are running scared, So our last question I always like to ask is, since you're an entrepreneur, technologist, running around like crazy, your success is predicated on, your motivation. What do you do for that equilibrium? What do you do on the side, nothing to do with business, to be able to come to work every day and kill it? What do you like to do for your mental just your, your balance?
Okay. Great question. I mean, I lean on my friends and family a lot. Carving out time during the week to, continue to build those relationships is something really important for me.
Are they in the city?
So my friends are in the city. My family is all spread out. My folks are in Texas. Have some siblings down there as well. Seeing them next week.
Oh, we got shooters,
good.
Huh?
Yeah.
We got shooters in the family. Better be careful, people out there.
They are not gun owners, but definitely some of their friends.
For the woke audience, they're not gun owners.
Some of their friends and neighbors, definitely.
Like every single one of them.
So yeah, friends and family is definitely a pillar for me. I'm big into meditation as well, just like finding that, time to just like relax and think about nothing, which is really hard because when you're a founder, you're just 24/7 thinking about your company. And
can I tell you a funny fact?
Yeah.
Not funny, interesting fact. I read this book by Tim Ferriss, Tools of Titans, and the only tie that binds like 80% of like the world's most successful, and I don't mean monetarily, Nobel Peace Prize, world leaders, the only thing is meditation. So you must be onto something.
I think I'm onto something. It definitely works, but it takes practice. It's one of those things that you've got to do like once or twice a day to really get into the habit, because the human nature is you start thinking about things, right? So yeah, those are some of the things that I do to disconnect from work, but it doesn't happen that often. Well,
listen, we really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about Igloo. Obviously, drop your socials. Let us know where to find you, how we track what's going on, your website, and thank you. So let the world know where to find you. Yeah, you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, Allia Mohamed. Definitely connect with us on Instagram and TikTok, openigloo. And yeah, send me. Is it at openigloo? Yes, at openigloo on Instagram, at openigloo_NYC on TikTok. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a note. Always happy to chat all things New York City real estate, entrepreneurship, or just. And last question: where's the next market after NYC? Where are you headed? Okay, Miami. I haven't told anyone, but it's going to be Boston or San Francisco. All right. We now know we're getting that insider data here. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate you. Thank you for having me. All right. Have a great day. It's about that time on the RTT podcast. Do we think what Allia was talking about on Igloo is a medicine, or is it a vitamin? The EB conclusion. So as I was alluding to, I've been reading a bunch of books on PropTech, and it always goes up to like 2019, not into 2020, 2021, as to what the changes are really happening in the marketplace. It was these theories that were kind of finished in 2019. I guess we'll start to see books published. But two of the themes that I found so interesting that Igloo is addressing. Number one, why was Airbnb so successful? And I didn't know. I mean, I'm reading it, right? I don't want to front like this is my theory. They built trust, right? Imagine, you could go to another city. You knew that it would be clean based on the trust that was built because people were able to create comments about the properties. So why shouldn't that be in New York? So to me, that's super interesting and a great way of sort of disrupting this space, right? The second thing I was alluding to was that management has changed. It's a little bit more into the tenant. You actually need to be a service provider to the tenant, not just say collect rent, sign this lease. I think that is also interesting. They're not necessarily addressing that, but they're talking to their tenants about that. And if you can get that advantage, that could be huge. I think one of the things that they have an issue, which I'm not sure yet how to address, is they're creating a marketplace for themselves for this, right? I don't know if Airbnb allowed other marketplaces or attached to them. It's like, because landlords in New York have to create these exclusive agreements, they're saying, to work with her. But what about if you like your broker? Like, is that too large a step to only get these services, building this trust, if you have to actually only work with them? I'm not sure what the solution is. These are my thoughts. But the reality is, bottom line, this is real. This is a medicine. How big it gets, I'm unaware. So let's stay tuned. I really enjoyed what she had to say. We got to check out what if her theses continue to play out. And, we'll check it in 6 months to a year. Like we said, we'd follow back up to see if what she was saying was true. So I'm really excited. It's definitely a medicine. And we'll see if I put my money where my big mouth is, We'll keep you posted. If you check out, our websites and you check out sort of the our sponsor's website, you might see openigloo up there. And that usually means that they've invested. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. I hope you tune in. Oh, don't forget, The Real Deal Show dropped episode 2, recording episode 3. Maybe that timing is true when you get to it. Maybe it's episode 3 to episode 4. But we're getting out there. Again, smash the like. Tell everyone about it. Tell your mother, tell your sister, tell your family. We out here. Again, I always like to tell you, if you see me on the street, say what's up to the big man. You know what I'm saying? I'm not getting enough love on these streets, people. All right, talk to you soon, peeps. Peace.